Hey folks, in this interview, it's all about Panasonic and their move into full frame. This is TWiP. Hey, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today on the show, I have the pleasure of having my friend, Mr. Mark Toal. He's from Panasonic. He's joining the show to set the record straight about full frame Panasonic Micro Four Thirds. Is Panasonic leaving Micro Four Thirds behind? Are they adding full frame to the lineup? What does this new world look like that Panasonic is building? Mark Toal, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. You haven't given me too much to cover here, huh?
No responsibility at all, man.
Anyway, it's nice to see you, and it's great to be on This Week in Photography. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Likewise, I've been wanting to have you on for a while. I want to
cool.
let's discuss since we had lunch up in Sacramento that day. Remember?
Yeah. So, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's start with just what your major function is over at Panasonic. What do you do for the company?
Okay, I am what's now known as Retail Services Manager, which means I'm in charge of all the tech reps. So I used to be, for the past 12 years, I've been a Lumix technical, supposedly expert. We'll see today on this interview. But so I'm basically a Lumix technical expert, and now I'm a manager of that team.
Nice. So you know a thing or two about Lumix cameras and
yeah.
ins and outs. So if there's any person on the planet to ask a question about Lumix, you should know it.
Well, no, we'll put a little asterisk there for Matt Frazier, okay?
Okay, Matt Frazier. Matt Frazier lives in the Matrix, so it's different.
He does. But I've been here since the G1. 10 years ago?
Yep.
And I was a Nikon shooter then, so I've gone the whole route, and I am a photographer also. So I'm not a professional photographer anymore. I used to be. Yeah. But so I approach these from both sides. Obviously I'm biased towards Panasonic, but I also look at these cameras as what can they do for me artistically.
Well, let's switch gears and dive into it, right? And let's start with the biggest elephant in the room, and that's when Panasonic introduced the S1 series cameras, it was Panasonic is leaving Micro Four Thirds after all this hubbub about Micro Four Thirds and how it's okay to use it. You don't need a full frame sensor. Then Panasonic releases a camera, the S1 series, with full frame, arguably, superior to some other full frames. And I'll say that because I'm a fan of Lumix, obviously, but and I have an S1 here on loan, and I can say that with some authority. It is a fantastic system. So what set the record straight here? What does the landscape at Panasonic look like with regard to full frame and Micro Four Thirds?
Well, our feeling is they reside together, that actually 4/3 is the bigger part of our business. But in still photography, especially, everybody wants full frame. It's the hot thing at the moment. But 4/3 still appeals to a lot of customers who want a smaller camera. A lot of people are putting things online now. It works great for video, the GH5. I think you're using a GH4 to record your side of this interview.
I am. Yeah.
So we see them both residing together. There's new models of the G series on the horizon. A new lens just got released this week, the 10 to 25 millimeter f1.7. So we fully plan to support both platforms. But again, we see anybody who's looked at the numbers sees that the full frame market is growing quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that again is primarily still photographers.
Yeah. But where does Panasonic put people in buckets? Like you just mentioned, so primarily still photographers, right? So is Panasonic hoping that, sort of the high-end pros will be the ones that migrate over to the S1s and everyone else will stay on Micro Four Thirds? Or is it a sort of a path of ascension where you hit the wall sensor-wise? Well, Micro Four Thirds, you move up to S1? What do you think?
No, I think they should both buy them both.
Of course you do.
You need a small camera and a big camera, right?
What's your credit card number again, Mark Toal?
So the way I look at it is that the S series, the full frame, is aimed more towards the professional or the serious landscape person. They don't even need to be a professional making money at the business. They could just be like the S1R, which is 47 megapixels. They could just be a high-end still photographer, maybe a Leica shooter. But we also want to appeal to that professional portrait photographer. Like you said, the camera hits every button. And arguably, it's got features that other full-frame cameras don't have. But the G series appeals to, well, I'm probably more of a G series customer. I'm a good example of it. I'm more of a street photographer. I want something small to carry with me all the time. It's a lot of times it's an older customer or a customer who travels a lot, who doesn't want to carry any big full frame camera in these big lenses. They want to carry a G series. So there's not kind of a clear distinction. And for video, it works both ways. A lot of people prefer the smaller sensor in the GH series for video because it's more forgiving of depth of field and things like that. But now there's a lot of people who want more artistic videos with shallower depth of field and things like that. So, yeah, I guess if you really had to draw a distinction, the S is aimed more at a professional, more advanced amateur market, and the G is aimed more towards the traveler, the person who wants a camera just that's light and easy to use.
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing that I found after I got the loaner in the S1 is obviously the menuing system is the same across all of the cameras, which is, you know, what I enjoy. I remember getting the little tiny, what was the little one? The little tiny Lumix camera, the world's smallest micro four thirds.
The GM1 and 5, yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting one of those things and sort of looking, I was like, this is the exact same menuing system as my larger cameras, you know, just missing some things, obviously, but it's the same. I love that sort of feel of being able to move from, like, say, the GH4 that I'm shooting on right now to an S1 to the GH5 that I use, it's behind me back there, that, you know, I use for video. So those, I love that flow of being able to move between the two. So if someone is considering an S1 or the S1R right now, and they're on a previous, you know, like a G series camera, what's the flow for them from your perspective? Can they keep both? And like you're like, you know, like you're doing street photography, but you know, like someone like me, is it feasible to keep both? All things being equal, you know, monetary wise. You know?
Yeah, monetary wise. Yeah, or you work for the company like I do, and they just send them to you.
You just show up on your desk. Hey, check this out, right?
But I wondered about that because we changed the menu system a little bit in the S series, but we know that that's one of the things that we get really high marks for. Panasonic has always gotten good reviews for having a very clean, easy to use menu system. So we didn't want to touch it. So yeah, I feel that like when I teach classes on how to use Panasonic cameras, that I can have people from an S series or a point and shoot in the class. The point and shoot might have more things in the menu, whereas the S series is going to have them as buttons. But or if you move up from a G series, a G9 to an S series, like I'm just looking at it here next to me, it's almost identical in control.
It is.
The S, as you see, put a few more chapter indentations in the menu, things like that, just to clean it up a little bit. But no, I feel somebody could go from the GM1 to this and adapt to it very easily.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the flow that I'm kind of looking at right now, you know, I'm trying to convince the powers that be over there. So if you know, put in a good word. I want to hang on to this S1 a little longer. Is back there behind me is, you know, back there's the GH5, which I don't know if you can see it, but at the top of it, there's a video. There's a Rode video mic on top of it. So that's sort of the run and gun vlogger camera. Next to it is a G9 sitting on top of the what do you call it? The tripod from Peak Design. You know, the new Peak Design tripod. Yeah. So that's sitting on there, and then for what I call, I don't know what you call proper photography or high resolution photography or whatever. There's the S series, you know, so those, I feel like I'm covered on all bases right now, except aerial until Panasonic comes out with an aerial camera or a drone. Right.
But
but I feel like I'm covered on all bases from you know, just sort of run and gun video to non-professional non-studio photography, which is the G9, and then studio level model shoots and that sort of thing with the bigger camera with more or less depth of field, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I approach it the same way. I was recently in your area, in the Bay Area. Yeah. And for most of the time, I'm working with Panasonic. I'm teaching. I'm going to stores, and I'm looking for it here around me here. I'm carrying the little LX100 too.
Oh yeah.
That I've got all tricked out with these accessories and my Peak Design strap and my little viewfinder.
You're such a hipster, man. You're such a hipster.
You got to keep up when you get older. You know?
Exactly. You have a leather jacket that matches the leather jacket you put on the camera.
You don't. Let's not go too far. So anyway, so I'm either carrying the LX100 II or I'm carrying the G9 with the 15 millimeter lens, But then I had a chance to photograph. Because I used to live in the area, somebody hired me who used to be a client to photograph some portraits. At first, when we first announced the S, I'm always like getting dragged in to technology, and I felt like, I'm not going to give up the G series. I love full frame, I love the look of it, I love the high ISO and the shallow depth of field, but the big size wasn't for me. But now I'm finding this balance. Now I'm finding I probably use the G series 70% of the time because I am mostly a street photographer. But to be able to pull out this full frame and just be able to, like you said, switch from one to the other because the menu system's the same, all the controls are the same,
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about it. I was talking to someone the other day about the size differences between the G cameras and the S cameras.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first saw the S camera, I was like, Jesus, this thing is this is a camera.
Yes.
Yeah, it was kind of like back to the old Nikon days when I had my F4 and all those. Like, okay, it wasn't quite that big, but it felt like that. But when you have this is the S1 right here. When I picked this camera up, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of those Nikon days when you were unapologetically a photographer, right?
Yes.
Not that you're apologizing by using any of the G series cameras, but they're smaller. They're, part of the, like you mentioned before, part of the allure of using those cameras is they're smaller, they're less obtrusive. Yeah. You could, people don't know that you're shooting half the time. You could put it on silent and go into stealth mode. The S series, when I go out with that thing, I feel like I'm a photographer, and I don't care who knows it. Yes, I am a photographer. A, because I got a big camera, so obviously I take great photos, right?
Yeah.
And then B, because it's a big camera, it's expensive, so I've invested in this camera. So you think, right? So. Yeah, I was wondering from your standpoint, is that the feel like when people go out with these S series cameras, it's unapologetic that they are a photographer and they mean business, or else why would they go through the effort to bring all this glass and technology out with them?
Exactly. An example I used is a few years ago, I used to photograph a country club in Menlo Park. Mm-hmm. And this was when there was just the G series, and I showed up with one of the small G3 cameras, and the person who'd hired me looked at me and they go, "Where's your real camera?"
Yeah, exactly.
And I had to back up. I said, look at my website. I guarantee you the pictures will be good. And they were happy with them. But yes, it does. So this goes back to those feeling like you've got everything under control too. You can do better low light. You can control the atmosphere more. In a portrait situation. And it's funny, like you said, when you pick up the camera, at first you look at it and you think it's big. And the thing I noticed with customers, because I was curious to see their responses, when they pick it up, their first response is how good the grip feels.
Yeah.
And their second response is how amazing the viewfinder is.
Yeah.
That viewfinder is 5.7 or 8 million dots is just incredible. And then the third thing that I absolutely love about it is the stabilization. The combination of shooting in low light and having this 6 stops of dual stabilization.
On a full frame sensor, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is part of what makes it big. People have asked me what makes this large. Well, moving that sensor around in there generates a lot of heat, as does the video that it does. And the S1 is a great video camera. It'll do the same video things we've always done, which are unlimited recording, 10-bit 422. Full sensor readout that generates a lot of heat, which is partially why the body is large.
Because that was one of the questions I was going to throw at you. I think you kind of answered it. Was the back to in the beginning, I was saying, who's the camera for? Who's the S1 or the full frame cameras for? Yeah. On the video side of things, my knee-jerk reaction is like GH series, GH4, GH5, GH5S. Those were almost purpose-built to be, groundbreaking bullet. I've done literally thousands of videos on this GH4, right? Yeah. And it still hums along. Every time I turn it on, it works great. But, when I look at the S1, I'm thinking, well, should I be thinking that the next step up for me, for video quality wise is the S series, or is it just, is it completely different? Am I thinking
Yeah.
Land Rover versus Hummer? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's just different because a good example is I was at Cinegear down in LA, which is a high-end video show at Paramount Studios, right? And these are all guys who work on films, work on movies, and a lot of them shoot GH4s and 5s like you do. And they are not going to abandon. I kind of thought they were going to come up and, wow, full frame video, I can't wait. But they didn't. There's a reason for that smaller sensor again, which is that more depth of field, more forgiving for video, especially for run and gun video. But they want to add the S1 because they do want for the creative scenes to be able to do a little shallower depth of field and especially to shoot a little bit lower light. So let's say even schools, churches, photographers, concert photographers, they might shoot with the S1 for video more for the low light capability than they do the larger sensor. Well, you're getting it from the larger sensor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I was hearing a lot of people I thought they were going to come and be like, oh, can I trade my GH5 in or my GH4? They're like, no, I have no reason to. I use it all the time, you know, and they don't expect the video to look a lot different, especially online, but when it's projected, you know, it's just going to be better in low light. It's going to just do different things for them. So they're definitely both going to exist in the world.
Yeah. No, I love it. You know, and then speaking of existing in the world, there's a new S-series camera or an additional S-series camera that was recently announced. Can you what can you tell us about that camera without, without changing your career field to In-N-Out Burger?
There's not even one in Portland. I can't
exactly.
I would be out of a job. I'd have to go to Whataburger.
It'd just be a commute. It'd be a commute for
you. Exactly. I moved back to Mountain View. So anyway, we showed the S1H at Cinegear for the first time under glass, and we announced that it is going to be our high-end video version of the S-series cameras. Now, it's also a still camera, but it's just got so many video features baked into it, which are basically, so the S1 shoots in 4K, so does the GH5, as you know. The S1H will shoot 6K at 3:2, so full sensor, 3:2.
Wow.
It'll do 10-bit 422 in the camera, unlimited recording, dual stabilization. They haven't announced a lot more features about it, but it's mainly, there's a big, I wouldn't say big, but my son works in the business, and there's a trend towards wanting to shoot 6K video so that you can crop it afterwards, not so that you deliver it as 6K. So that's a little bit of the idea behind this camera. And we're going to announce, it's going to ship in the fall. We're going to announce more about this camera in a few weeks. And it's just going to have just a ton of features. But again, it's very similar to the S1. If you looked at the body style, it's just a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker. And again, a lot of that has to do with heat and getting the heat out of there because, again, when you're doing 6K video and it'll do 4K up to 60p in unlimited recording, you're just generating a lot of heat in these cameras. So I wish I could tell you more about it, but I do want to keep the job for a little longer.
No, I do not want you taking my order at In-N-Out, man. So no disrespect to the In-N-Out workers because I'm going there after this, but I'm just saying we need you at Panasonic. So okay, so you mentioned in a couple of months or in September. We're recording this in August of 2019.
Right.
When can we expect to see this thing hit the streets roughly?
Well, they've announced fall. So that could be September, October, somewhere around there. I think you'll see it. You'll see it in the stores for sure. Nice. And there's also more lenses coming. We're coming out. There's a roadmap that's been out for a while. And again, I don't have the exact dates, but there's a 24 to 72/8 coming. Yeah. There's a 16 to, I believe, 35 f4 coming. The Sigma lenses, Sigma and that's one of the neat things about the system is because we are building our lens catalog, but we can still use the L-mount Leica lenses, and Sigma now just came out with, I think it's 4 lenses in the L-mount. I
saw that, yeah.
And then they also have the, if you don't mind me showing, the MC21 adapter, it's called. So this adapts the L-mount to Canon full-frame mount, and of course I can't get it back together. But
does that send through TTL information or focusing, or is it?
It sends through TTL information, so it focuses, it exposes, it doesn't continuously autofocus. It only single focus. So for video, you would want to manually focus, but that means you can adapt any Sigma or any Canon lens ever made to it. And again, they're mainly made for the Sigmas because Sigma makes the adapter.
Yeah.
Where Sigma lens is coming, I think I don't quote me for sure, but I think they have 9 more. I think they're supposed to have like 10 or 12 by the end of the year in the dedicated L mount. And then all the Leicas fit, and they've got these amazing lenses that resolve to that,
Yeah. So here's another question though. So speaking of adapting lenses and all that, so I have a couple of Micro Four Thirds lenses that obviously I use on the cameras that I have here. Obviously you can't, it's not obvious, but I'm assuming you can't adapt them up to use a Micro Four Thirds lens on an S1 body because, it's covering a different area. But what about adapting down? Can I take a some S1 glass and throw it on one of my older GH4s, GH5 bodies?
Yeah, you can. All you'd have to do is buy an L to 4/3 adapter, which I'm sure there's one out there. When Matt Fraser and I were making videos about this, we tried to get every adapter we could, and we even found a Mamiya RZ, whatever it's called, Mamiya 6.7 adapter to L mount. And, somebody out there is making an adapter for everything.
Wait a minute, there was a Mamiya RZ 6.7 or 6.45 adapter to Micro Four Thirds?
No, to L mount.
L mount.
Oh, I'm sure there is to Micro Four Thirds. I've bought Topcon adapters. I've bought adapters for cameras that are 50 years old.
Wow.
Panasonic doesn't make them. But I always tell people some guy in Singapore is making these in his garage, and all you have to do is type it in.
Wow. Yeah.
And it'll be available. But we were adapting also. Now, another thing, like you can put APS-C lenses on this camera. So like using the MC21, or if you put a Leica mount, one of their, what are they, the CL mount, I think, is their APS-C. If you put a CL mount lens, which is an L mount, on the S series, it automatically crops down to the APS. It automatically does the 1.5 times crop to the APS-C. And if people do want to know, the reason you won't be able to use a G series lens on this is not that somebody couldn't make an adapter. They could, but the flange difference is wrong. The lens would have to go into the body a little bit. And again, Panasonic has said it's not possible, but that guy in Singapore right now, he's pretty driven.
Yeah. It's flexible, man. Yeah. Like the Micro Four Thirds system is flexible, and it's been around for a minute or two, right?
Oh, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've adapted, there's Nikon to L mount. I've adapted my old Nikon lenses to this. I've adapted a Russian screw mount lens to the S series and to the G series. That's kind of the neat thing about mirrorless, is that you can mix and match all this stuff.
Yeah. You can play around. So in terms of quality of sensors, we're switching gears back to Micro Four Thirds. Sure. We've got Olympus, putting out cameras with Micro Four Thirds sensors, and Panasonic Lumix, putting out Micro Four Thirds cameras. Is there a difference between the quality of the image that comes off of the sensors, or is it all in the processing that happens in the software in the camera after the actual image is recorded?
Yeah, this is a bit of an opinion on my part, rather than I try not to get buried in the tech stuff. Okay, obviously there's a difference in the sensors. They're not all the same sensors. Yeah. But what I tell customers is the difference isn't so much in the quality of the image. If you're buying a 20 megapixel Olympus and you're buying a 20 megapixel Panasonic, it has more to do with the features of the camera. Whether you like the Wi-Fi on one, whether you like the look and feel of one, whether you like our stabilization or their stabilization. I don't know if Panasonic would like me saying this, but the playing field is pretty even these days as far as camera quality. Yeah. Like if you look at the reviews of the S1 and the S1R sensor, especially the S1R sensor, I think DxO picked it as the best sensor they've ever tested as far as dynamic range and things. But that doesn't mean that the sensor in whatever camera that people don't buy many of is not fine. Yeah. But I try to steer people to what features are you looking for in a camera? Is video important to you? Then Panasonic, dual stabilization. That's one feature we do have over Olympus that I don't mind saying. But I don't think if you put both of them on a tripod, would the image quality be better? To be honest with you, probably not, unless you really pixel peeped.
Right, and I think we're at this level now where Yeah, like you're saying, it's like, we're splitting hairs in
Yeah,
terms of that stuff. It comes down to ergonomics, like you said, of the camera,
right.
specific features that you may need if you're doing video versus this versus that, and the operating system in the camera.
Exactly. Yeah.
Does it work with your brain? Everyone's brain is wired slightly differently. Mine more
Yeah.
so than others, but it's like,
Well, it's kind of like the Mac and PC people used to be,
yeah,
It really comes down to they both end up doing the same thing. Photoshop works the same in both of them.
yeah,
It's just, how do you like to get there? How do you like the file system? How do you like the menus?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's a lot about that. But again, we have a certain technical advantages, and in the S series, I think, the reason we use this phrase "full frame without compromise" is we literally put everything but the kitchen sink into this. 2 fast card slots, the best stabilization out there, the best sensor. We threw everything into this camera.
yeah. And that's what I was thinking. We've said this on TWiP before, and I used to, and I still say this. I stand by this. The R&D, the research for what people want is out there, right? I mean, especially for a full frame mirrorless camera. That's why we're all scratching our heads on Canon and Nikon. It's like, everyone's done all the work for you. Sony, etc., has done all the work for you. What you want, what we want in cameras. Just take all that data and build it, and they will come, right?
I know. And that's one thing I do have to say about Panasonic is they did put everything in this. Some of the other companies, we won't mention who, got kind of dinged when they came out with their full frame mirrorless camera for taking features out of it,
Yeah.
for not having 2 card slots. And there's reasons for it. They have higher end cameras. The nice thing about Panasonic is we've sort of never had something to protect. When we invented mirrorless along with Olympus in the G series, we didn't have any legacy lenses or cameras to protect. We could kind of do the whole thing over again.
Yeah.
And other companies, it doesn't make their cameras any better or worse, but and we all know who the companies are. They have legacy owners. I used to be one of them, a Nikon user, and I would have been pretty upset if my 8 or 10 lenses didn't fit the new camera. They just kicked me to the side of the road. So they have to be a lot more careful than we do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I often wonder, big companies like Panasonic and Sony, for example, have multiple product lines. Like Panasonic makes everything, right? So it's hard not to compete with yourself, right?
I don't think you can see the microwave oven back there, but
right, everything. I was in an elevator one day. I looked up. There's a security camera. Panasonic. Everywhere there's Panasonic.
Yeah, that stuff's huge.
Yeah. So I wonder, like things like innovating with mirrorless cameras, knowing that Panasonic also makes high-end cameras as well. Same on the Sony side. Is Panasonic, or I know you can't speak for Sony, but is Panasonic, do they have to play within a certain sandbox so that they don't cannibalize these larger entities within the company, so that Hollywood doesn't say, you know what, we would have spent $20 million, but we're just going to buy GH5s instead.
Well, in fact, that because we have what's called a broadcast division that sells the really high-end cameras that NBC uses, and they make Netflix films with and things like that. And so when the GH4 came out, especially, there was a point there where they knew a lot of their customers were going to buy this, and were they going to stop buying the broadcast cameras? And what was nice about it is it's kind of like Apple and what Steve Jobs used to do. It's like, well, we can't really, we can worry about that, but we can't really let it stop us, And it turned out they bought both, that they looked at let's say an EVA camera or a Vericam as being their main camera for, let's say, their independent film. And the GH5 is the camera that lets them get in close and do light things. And as I was surprised, they even as a crash cam.
Yeah. Like a disposable camera.
Oh yeah, I remember when one guy from who worked on some TV show, The Greatest Catch or something, one of these Alaskan fishing shows. Tell me, we're going to buy like 10 or 15 of them. He goes, that way, if the guy slips on the deck and drops it overboard, they're cheap.
Yeah, relatively speaking, right?
Well, yeah, I don't see it as cheap, but they do, And so he said, but in the, when we're in the wheelhouse or when we're doing the interviews, we're still going to use the bigger. So it worked out good, but yeah, there always is that balancing act to do.
That's fantastic. Well, what can you tell us about what's coming up next? As we ramp this discussion down. Yeah. Without losing your job, without going to In-N-Out Burger, and filling out the application, what can Mark Toal tell us about what the future holds for people that are fans of Lumix?
Okay, well, again, it's basically mainly the S1H, and
Yeah.
I would say watch for more information on that in the next month or so here, and that's going to be just, I think, a killer video camera. I think it's going to do for us what the GH4 did when it was released, which was more bang for the video buck than any camera out there.
Love it.
And then we're going to continue to develop the S lens systems. That's the main thing now, because with 3 lenses, it's a little hard to get traction. But with the new 16 to 35, the 24 to 72.8, things like that, we're going to build the system out. We knew it would be a slow takeoff because of that.
Yeah, there you go. And photographers love glass, right? So.
Oh yeah, but I just like a full frame point and shoot. I could just that would be my street camera. But until then, the LX100 goes with me everywhere, and
with its little leather jacket on, right?
It's a little leather jacket. It's little fancy viewfinder here, which I never did. And it's gray peak design strap. Please note that it's the gray one.
Nice. All right.
Anyways.
Well, cool. So before I let you go, one question I forgot to ask you was resolutions for the people that may not be familiar with the S series. You got the S1, the S1R, then the upcoming S1H. What are the respective pixel count resolutions on those bodies?
S1 is 24 megapixels. S1R is 46, 47. It's somewhere in between. It's got one of those dots in there, something like that. Mm-hmm. And the S1H they haven't confirmed yet, so we have to wait on the S1H. It's
okay. You saw me. I'm trying to get that out of you. You saw that.
and then real quick, just the S1 and the S1R both have these phenomenal high resolution modes where it moves the sensor around to record a higher resolution image. And on the S1R, it's 187 megapixel image. And on the S1, it's 95, I believe, megapixel image. It's pretty incredible.
Wow,
so
that's crazy.
There's just some neat technology in here. But I fall back on image quality, image stabilization, just the basics. I hate to say it. I want a good picture.
Yeah, it's all about light. It's all about light.
It is.
All right. So you mentioned earlier, Mark, that you're a photographer. If people want to go check out your work or follow you, what's a good location for that?
The best thing is Facebook and Instagram, where I just use my name, Mark, M-A-R-K, last name Toal. Just check out my stuff there. I have a website, but I haven't updated in a while, marktoalphotography.com. Since I stopped doing things professional, I haven't updated it, but it's got a lot of pictures on it from Lumix cameras.
Very cool. All right. Mark Toal, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Frederick.
This is TWiP.